Winter Danger, Chapter 7, Part 2. We've got a really pretty song in this one. Don't think I can do it justice, but I will drop a link to a really cool version here on YouTube, so be sure to check that out. A few nights later, Caje sat in front of the fire, listening to the wind moan around the Tadlock cabin. It rushed down the chimney like a wild thing and made the flames and smoke lick out into the room. The room was full of smoke already, and it bit and burned Cage's eyes and nose. A fine white ash drifted down over his knees. He brushed it away. Where was Jared tonight? He wondered. That wind's a sight tonight, Uncle Adam said suddenly. He glanced at Caje. Did I ever tell you about the time the wind blew the moon away around here, Caje? He asked. Caje looked up, startled. Uncle Adam was in a jollified mood, joking and telling tales. Caje reckoned he'd be glad to hear a tale. It was a dreary night, cold enough to make a body's bones pop, and the wind howling like a catamount. Tonight, he reckoned, Jared would grieve that he'd left the Tadlocks without a word of farewell. No man could last out this weather in a hollow tree. But Jared was tough. Caje figured if anybody would come through this bad time, it would be Jared. He wasn't so sure about himself. It was a sorry thing to be a lone boy, living with folks who thought he was not worth his salt. Oh, he'd be glad to hear a funny tale, so long as he wasn't the one who had to tell it. Ain't airy one of you young'uns heard that tale, Uncle Adam went on. Matildy has, said Martha promptly, but she says she don't recollect it so good. She don't care if she hears it again. Well, when I was a boy here on the Holston, began Uncle Adam. Ah, Pa, interrupted Sam. When you come here, I was 3 years old. Hush, Sam, scolded Dorcas. Mr. Tadlock stopped and glanced at his youngest son. Who's telling this tale? He asked. Well, you said many a time we come here the year you got snake bit, and I was... Ah, Sam, said Bird. Go on, Pappy. The hound Springer got up and went to the door and sniffed around the crack at the bottom. Then he came back and lay down on the hearth at Sam's feet. Martha leaned dreamily against Bird, who sat whittling a new axe handle. Dorcas and Mrs. Tadlock were patching a quilt, sewing the bright pieces of cloth together in a design called Flower Garden. Caje sat a little apart from the others, but he couldn't help wishing the hound had lain down by him. Well, like I said, when I was a chap, about knee-high to a huckleberry bush, we had a terrible wind one night, Mr. Tadlock began. It blowed worse'n this one tonight's a-blowing. It blew so tarnal hard, it blowed the moon right smack dab out of the sky, and folks hereabouts never laid eyes on it for 4 months. The hound looked around at Uncle Adam and opened its mouth in a yawn. Adam, said Aunt Jess, even Springer don't believe that. And even Uncle Adam had to laugh. He went on, well, it wasn't a laughing matter at the time. We was in a bad way, and you can't just cut me down to size if I'm lying. And you can just cut me down to size if I'm lying. Why, folks didn't know when to plant their taters and beans, and I remember my oldest sister couldn't get married whilst the moon was gone from the sky. Why, Pappy? Asked Dorcas, her needle in midair. Whatever did the moon have to do with marrying? A bride will be happy and the groom prosperous if married when the moon's full, said Aunt Jess. That's a saying a great growed girl like you ought to know. Bird, said Martha, Matildy'd like you to sing that song about the moon. Would you like it too, Marthy? Bird asked in a serious tone. I don't care if I do, Martha answered and turned to Caje. Do you, Caje? I didn't know Bird knowed how to sing, Caje replied. He don't, so's you can tell, Sam jeered. Bird couldn't carry a tune in a piggin. Hush up, Sam, and let Bird sing, Aunt Jess said. Is this the song ballad you want, Marthy? Bird asked. He began to sing. Frog went a-courting and he did ride, bright moonlight by his side. Martha shook her head. Nah, that ain't the one, Bird. Bird began to sing again. Up the holler and on the other side, moon shining bright as a groundhog's hide. Martha interrupted him and exclaimed, That ain't right, Bird. It ain't the one I like. Uncle Adam laughed. Quit teasing, Bird. Bird looked into the fire and began. Way up yonder above the moon, a blue jay nests in a silver spoon. Buckeye Jim, you can't go, go weave and spin, you can't go, Buckeye Jim. Way down yonder by a hollow log, a red bird danced with a green bullfrog. Caje listened to the lilting tune. Never had he heard a prettier song. His ma had liked to sing woeful ballads of people dying of love and in battle. Jared didn't hold with such foolishness as tunes and singing. The gay tunes that Bird sang, with Sam and Dorcas joining in, were something new to Caje. He wished he knew a song and could sing it, but the only song that came into his head was the ugly one the wolves sang along the cliff's edge on a moonlight winter night, and nobody wanted to hear that. He wondered again where Jared was. The songs ended. Sam yawned with the hound. It was bedtime. Aunt Jess said, "You boys had better sleep down here on the hearth tonight. It'll be too cold in the loft." Sam climbed the ladder and threw down all their covers, while Bird and Caje brought in some wood for the fire and a few extra logs to use during the night. The wind tore at them like a cornered beast, and the cold went slashing through Caje like a knife. When the wood was piled by the hearth, Uncle Adam barred the door and said, "It's so cold tonight, you boys will have to feed the fire with one hand and sleep with the other. Worst winter weather I've seen, and here December's hardly begun." Bird and Sam slept together on one side of the hearth, and Caje slept on the other. The hound edged over beside Caje, and the boy reached out and pulled the dog to him. He lay awake, watching the fire for a long while. Uncle Adam began to snore. Once, from the lean-to room where they slept, he heard Dorcas tell Martha to quit wiggling. The flames whispered, and the roof boards creaked. The cold seeped up through the cracks in the puncheon floor and blew under the door. Caje could feel the wind creeping in under his quilts. He pulled Springer around behind him and snuggled up to the dog. "Now I got somebody abed with me, even if it ain't but old Springer," he told himself. Later the wind died down. Way off, Caje heard some animal crying. It sounded like a deer, but he wasn't sure. The sound came again, closer to the cabin. Now Caje knew it was the bleating of a deer. He'd never heard one call like that except in terror. He reckoned the deer were cold too. One of the cows mooed several times, and Uncle Adam stirred uneasily in his bed. The firelight flickered over Caje. He was lucky to be here, he told himself. These people were his kin, and they were good to him. As soon as spring came, he'd leave and not trouble them any more. Someday. He must have drifted off to sleep. There was a sudden, terrible, ripping crash, and the cabin shook. Uncle Adam was standing in the middle of the floor. "What in the nation?" he cried. Caje sat up in his quilts. Sam asked sleepily, "What is it, Pappy?" "Want your rifle, Pappy?" asked Bird, jumping to his feet. Uncle Adam ran to the door and unbarred it to stare out into the night, but in a second or two he shut it again. "Must have been a tree," he said. "Too much snow and ice will bring down a tree quick as an axe. If it was that big sugar tree, we're lucky it didn't fall on the cabin and kill us all."